Hello, this is Tim Law with Playing It Forward Coaching and Self-Reliance U. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Playing It Forward Coaching, for a lot of great interviews that you'll be able to observe and learn from, especially you teens and young adults. I am very honored to have a guy that I actually met face-to-face just about a year ago up near the Allentown, Pennsylvania region. A gentleman named Thomas Kersting, who's put together an absolutely cutting edge book called Disconnected. Okay, it is a must read for any parent that is concerned about the health and well-being of their children. And so, Tom, fire away. I'm going to probably ask you some questions as we go. And great having you.
Yeah, good to see you. Tim and I have become pretty good friends. We communicate, text each other. We're on the same page with a lot of things. Yeah, so I know that Tim, you and I met in person. I was doing a lecture out in Pennsylvania about a year ago. That was fantastic having you there. It was for teachers. There was probably about 500 teachers there. It was a professional development. And so Disconnected, that's the second edition of the book that I wrote in 2016. That just came out in August. And the reviews, if you go on Amazon, pretty much most of the reviews start with every parent, every educator must read this book, because they should. It just dives deeply into this epidemic problem that we have in our society right now with our kids 24 hours a day glued to their phones. And one of the biggest things about this book, aside from the science and the brain neuroplasticity and the social implications, is the distractibility. And essentially what's really happening, what our children and adults alike are distracted from, is themselves, the deeper part of self. That's a lot of stuff I've been lecturing on and doing different appearances about, is really this foundation of the inner self that a lot of people don't even know exists at this point.
Yeah, I certainly agree, Tom. Absolutely. And again, I'm preaching to the choir to you. The key trait as far as the conscious mind is concerned, it's going to only focus on one thing well at a time. So this distraction you discuss is absolutely very, very true. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. And, so all the stuff since that book came out, the researchers have, we see the mental health implications, the anxiety, the depression, the suicide rate at epidemic proportions. And it was at epidemic proportions prior to COVID-19 setting in a year ago. And what I'm seeing now, Tim, at my, I have a private counseling practice. I'm a therapist, and you see it on the news, the effects that it's having on the kids and so forth. I'm seeing it day to day on the front lines with kids, middle school and high school kids that are really struggling. And why they're struggling. Let me try to articulate this, right? So yes, our kids are online, for a lot of kids are doing, are doing virtual schooling. Okay. They're not engaged with their peers the way that they're supposed to be in terms of athletics, academics, just walking down the hallways and so forth. There's this social isolation component, which doesn't jive well, with anybody, especially kids, because, kids by nature, they're wired that they're supposed to be socially, and emotionally connected to other people. So all of that has been completely watered down and removed from them right now. And what we have is kids that have become extraordinarily lonely and confused and not sure where they're heading or where the world is heading and so forth. And although that those are the facts, and there's a lot of truth, to this mental health component, what I'm trying to help individuals do, kids, adults alike, is to try to embrace that. All right. So one thing I talk about, Tim, is the difference between loneliness and aloneness. And those two words kind of juxtapose one another because they have the same definition. It's just being by yourself, but the definition is completely really opposite. So loneliness is a sort of void. All right. It's a not really knowing how to be with oneself without getting frightened. All right. Aloneness is the opposite of that. Aloneness is empowering. It's deeply powerful. So some of the work I'm trying to do is to get people to understand what that even means. So, and the only way to understand that is by practicing, utilizing aloneness. In other words, meditating, steering your thinking, finding the spiritual component within yourself, and developing a powerful relationship with self. And the reason why people are having a hard time, kids in particular, is because they've never gotten to know self, because they've been distracted by these things 24 hours a day. And now all they have is self, and it's very confusing and messes with their minds and emotions. So it's really a sort of new self-discovery that I'm trying to get people, particularly kids, to embrace and to understand and to work from the inside out.
Mhm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Tom. And I think as far as, because you're so cutting edge as far as a lot of this information, being the clinical psychologist up there in New Jersey for a number of years, and what you're seeing, it's interesting as far as what you're trying to do is let parents know about some of these challenges and dangers of this. And I mean, let's face it, technology's here to stay. We understand that, but the idea that we're so involved with the scenarios that they're chasing social media, they're chasing the gaming and everything like that. Could you kind of give an observation as far as what you're seeing? And one that really hit me was when you talked about the acquired ADHD. That to me is that's a big deal.
Yeah. So I actually had a Zoom meeting with some school principals in a town not far from here. I'm going to be doing a Zoom lecture for the middle school kids. And so of course I was talking about something called acquired ADHD. It's not actually, it's not an official term, but when I started started researching and lecturing on this topic, which was in 2009, believe it or not, I started doing that because I worked at a high school at the time, and we started getting this influx of teenagers that had been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And it just doesn't add up. You don't catch. It's not something you get. It's something you're born with. And if a kid isn't diagnosed until they're 14 or 15, according to acquired ADHD, they probably don't actually have ADHD. It's essentially they have symptoms of ADHD, the inattentiveness, lack of focus, and they have, and it's not the neurological condition of ADHD, but doctors don't even know this because they just look at the symptoms. All right, you have ADHD. What's really happened is something called brain neuroplasticity, where their brains have literally recircuited and rewired themselves from spending so much time in front of a screen. That's what neuroplasticity is. Any brain that's involved in something highly stimulating for 3 hours or more per day, the brain will grow these things called neural pathways and assimilate to that environment and unadapt to the natural habitat. So we know our kids are spending way more than 3 hours a day, more like 8 or 9 hours a day. So we're seeing a lot of that, this acquired ADHD. The other thing I'll talk about, Tim, is what I refer to as cyber self-esteem. Okay. And you saw me when when you're at that lecture and you read the book, obviously. Many of our kids, or really all of them for that matter, at a very young, impressionable age, during pre-adolescence and adolescence, a time of self-discovery, figuring out who I am, because they have social media, the stuff they're posting, the pictures on Instagram, the TikTok videos and all this other stuff. They don't really even realize they're doing this, but they're seeking approval from others, right? They're seeking being noticed from others. And it's a constant thing that's artificially fueling their self-esteem. In fact, it's harming their self-esteem because it's coming from the external world, right? And nothing external fills our internal world. That's why it's called
happiness is an inside job.
Inside out.
Yeah.
And self-esteem, that's why it's called self-esteem. It's how I feel about me. It's not about how others feel about me based on something I've done. So that I'm really trying to, help. And I've talked about that in Disconnected, of course, this what I call cyber self-esteem, and the idea that, self, how I feel about myself, how anybody feels about themselves can only come from inside. It can't come from outside sources. And that's where our kids are tangled right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes total sense. And how about the, Tom, if you could go into the part as far as the part of the, one of the other things that you said that really hit me was that when a kid is on these devices, there's 1,000 people on the other side with the bells, the whistles, and everything like that, trying to suck you in. And what part of the brain's pleasure centers are these devices impacting? Because this is a big deal. That really impacted me when you were talking about those parts of the brain that light up those pleasure centers.
Yeah, exactly. So so every time you get an alert on your phone, right? There's a little hit of dopamine that you get. Okay. The strategies that the gaming industry uses, for example, like, why are video games so addictive now when back, in the 1980s, they weren't, right? So they're designed that way. So they have, hundreds, sometimes thousands of engineers behind the development of a video game. And these games use these little token rewards, like a slot machine effect.
Mhm.
So that, like Fortnite, for example, has these emotes and these other things, these little, and these skins, they call them. And they're designed so that when you're playing this game, you get those quick hits of this dopamine, and you keep getting it and getting it and getting it. And dopamine is what's tied to addiction. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's why it's so difficult to reel these kids off. And you see stories of, kids that are so firmly addicted to these games that they're just not functioning. I mean, I had a parent in a couple weeks ago. Her son hasn't been to school in a year at all.
Wow.
He plays
Wow.
14 or 15 hours of video games a day. And she's afraid that if she takes that off, that the kid might kill her, literally, or
Mhm.
kill himself.
Mhm.
That's how deeply, addicted this kid is. And the World Health Organization, about 2 years ago, finally recognizes gaming disorder as an actual diagnosable classifiable condition, right? And that's just gaming. And the phones, all these, social media sites that kids are on, it's the same thing. They're constantly getting that, that pleasure center of the brain stimulated, that dopamine release, and they can't get enough of it. They can't remove themselves from it. And it's like 9 hours a day, and,
Mhm.
and 9 hours, technology, Tim, like we've talked about, is here to stay, and technology is a great thing, believe it or not. But 9 hours a day of anything is not a great thing. Even if you work out 9 hours a day, that's bad for you. Think about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just some good common sense there. Uh, Also, Tom, on some of my notes here, and again, there's certain things we could spend 3 days on your book for sure. Just trying to hit some of the other ones. You mentioned in there as far as what job recruiters are seeing, the issue more and more with the lack of charisma, poor social skills when they're interviewing some of these people. Could you discuss that for a little bit?
Yeah, so I talk about emotional intelligence in the book, EQ versus
Mhm.
IQ, right? And an IQ, we know what your intelligence quotient is, something that's fixed. If you have an IQ of 120, you're not getting it to 140, no matter what. You can go read every book in a library. It's fixed. Now, your EQ, which stands for your emotional quotient, is your emotional intelligence, and that's
Mhm.
your ability to understand your emotions, right? To regulate your emotions, to empathize with the emotions of others, to cope with life's adversities, right? So emotional intelligence is part of, what you and I are doing right now. The
Mhm.
ability to kind of connect with, even though it's on a screen, this is second best thing, right? Um, Now, to develop a strong emotional intelligence, the only way we acquire a strong EQ is by face-to-face interaction with others.
Mhm.
Now, as far as your question in terms of the job interview stuff, and I live a half hour from New York City, so most of the people in my town, guys, I know they work in finance and so forth, or used to in the city. Now
Yeah.
they all work from home, as New York City is just getting destroyed, by the way. And what they have told me and people I've spoken to over the last several years is that they're getting a lot of kids coming from, top universities, the Northeast, Northeastern, Boston College, all these other schools, Fordham, Columbia, schools like that. And you get a kid that's got this, stellar transcript, 3.8 GPA,
Mhm.
and they come in for a job interview, and there's something not there. There's something missing, and that's part of this ability to connect and be convincing on a job interview, right? To
Mhm.
to put yourself forth. Um, and you have these guys my age, in their 40s, that are in upper management positions. They have these young, entry level college students coming in, and it's like, anybody there? What's going on? What's behind that? And we're seeing a lot of that, and it's very, very problematic. And the reason for that is because that generation has had such little real face-to-face interaction with other human beings, because they have had so little of that, that they never develop that skill. Because that's something, EQ is something that is, you're
Yeah.
not born. It's
That's
something that,
part of that. That's part of that neural pruning you talk about, Tom.
yeah, yeah.
Those synapses and neurons just aren't there. They've been pruned.
That's right. Those neural pathways that are necessary to be a great face-to-face communicator. If you're not using face-to-face communication enough, it gets pruned away. That's what neural pruning is, what I talk about in the book. And it's pretty scary when you think about it. What's going on out there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The other thing is that what you were seeing was some of the students that just seen the high school, these strong emotional meltdowns and everything. Now, obviously, 2020 was a very challenging year with, the whole COVID. I mean, it was tough on everybody, but you being a longtime athlete in baseball, I was in collegiate wrestling and beyond. It's almost like we have a suit of armor a little bit emotionally because we've gone through those ups and downs. And I try to encourage kids, it doesn't have to be sports, but get yourself involved with sports, band, music, extracurricular things. So you're getting those face-to-face conversations. You're involved with the plays. You're involved with something where you're creating some kind of value for the school. And the idea of stuff just going into yourself, doing nonstop things as far as, the gaming or social media. And so talk about some of those meltdowns that you've seen that really over like something that you and I being blessed with our athletic background, it's like, what are they talking about? This is nothing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I get these, in my private practice, I'll have parents call me up and, they'll say, yeah, I heard about your book and I know that you work with kids and so forth. My son, he's a good kid, but he's really, he's got an anger issues out here. Right. And then I get this kid in my office who's like sweet as pie, right? Never gotten in trouble at school or anything. And the first thing I know is the kid doesn't really have anger issues. He's got addiction issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like if you take, drugs away from it's almost like if you took crack away from a crack addict and they freak out and go nuts. And, I'll have parents will tell me, I'll have this kid in my office that there's holes in the bedroom wall, because whenever they take the phone or gaming system away, he freaks out. So that's a perfect example of addiction is when that stimulating device is removed from a lot of kids and they freak out. Think about that. All right. Your phone just got taken away for a couple of hours and you go into an emotional frenzy like you've never seen before over a dumb phone being taken away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of that. And it's tough. It's tough helping these kids through that, help them manage, their emotions and, when parents tell them no, basically.
Right. Yeah, certainly makes a lot of sense.
One other thing I want real quick.
Go ahead, Tom. Sure.
Yeah. Talking about, you got my head going here now.
That's the goal. Mission accomplished. I want to climb right into your brain.
Yeah. So here's another thing that nobody's talking about yet because they don't know about it, but I'm going to hypothesize that this is going to be a major problem, in another year or maybe less. These mask mandates that we have, right? From COVID-19, everybody wearing a mask. And, it's the reason for that is to protect people from catching it. You hear the different sides of the story that masks work, they don't work, this and that, whatever. The bigger issue, in my opinion, that we're going to see is because our children have had to be, for the last year are wearing masks. All right. You can't, when I go to the supermarket, after we're done with this, my wife and I are going to the supermarket to go food shopping. Right. And I'm, like me and you very much alike. We're outgoing guys, people, we like to laugh, right? I like to smile and make little jokes. If I'm going to go to the supermarket now and I'm going to check out, and my natural inclination is to, whoever the person is that's checking me out, to connect with them and, say a little joke or two and make them laugh. I can't tell because they have a mask on. I have no idea what they're thinking, or if I've just, if anything I just said, lit them up at all and so forth. The point being is that because of these masks, particularly younger kids, elementary age, in elementary school, all of those nuances, those nonverbal nuances is how we learn to communicate. Okay. It's how we connect energetically as human beings. But now that's gone. Right. So what is going to happen, this hypothesis, and I'm going to be right about it, is because of the masks and because our kids are not, communicating face to face, there's going to be major social communication and emotional issues that we're going to start seeing in another year with many kids. Yeah. They've just lost.
Makes total sense.
Really critical milestones during very critical stages of development have been removed. And this is going to be a problem.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more, Tom, because as you already know, as far as body language, they've always talked about the eyes, but it's actually the reading of the mouth that really determines, various people's emotions, whatever, whether it's anger or whatever. And absolutely. That makes, 100% sense for sure. As far as kids, again, gearing it more toward the parents and everything. One of the things that really bothers me, I'll go into a store, there'll be some kid that really should be walking around or whatever. They're sitting in the grocery cart, on the gaming device. And this is a kid 5-6 years old. What do's and don'ts would you say to parents regarding, some of these devices? I'm already telling the kids I coach, listen, keep these, your nighttime is a time for the brain to recharge. I say, keep your devices in another room altogether to charge them up. Do not have them in the bedroom. Kid will say, well, I use it for an alarm clock. I said, well, there's a thing called an alarm clock you can go buy at the store for about $2, get that instead, it's like, this isn't, as I say, rocket science. So your some of your main thoughts and advice toward parents, Tom, as we kind of, move toward concluding here.
Yeah. So what I've seen, and we've all seen for that matter, what a lot of parents of younger children now, like toddler age kids, you go to a restaurant and the device is in front of them. You go to the supermarket and the kid's in the cart and the device is in front of them. And the reason for that is what these parents don't realize, what they're not understanding is, well, they're doing that because it pacifies the kid. It helps the kid behave because they're hypnotized by this device. But it's actually causing the opposite effect, because the kid, being a part of being a child and part of being a parent is our children learning how to behave in certain situations. So if you take your kid to a restaurant and they're young and something happens, that kid has a meltdown, the only way they're going to learn is by having that meltdown in real life, right? The next time you can communicate with them and so forth. But we've now removed that from the equation, right? So our kids aren't learning what is appropriate and what's not appropriate in terms of how they should act, whether it's in church, in the supermarket, or a restaurant.
Right.
Because it is, they're supposed to, like when you have at church, for example, I go to church every Sunday, and if a kid starts crying and getting upset or whatever, the parent will take them and bring them somewhere else. But by doing that, they're teaching the kid based on the conversations they have about the fact that, how to manage your emotions in certain situations. But if we pacify them and hypnotize them in situations, how are they ever going to learn how to act in a certain situation, like in the supermarket or church or school and so forth? And the answer is they're not.
Yeah. It absolutely makes sense, Tom, for sure. Anyway, this has been fantastic. Any last parting thoughts here? Again, one of the things I try to do with these videos is not have them be too extensively long, just so, we want as many people to observe these. Obviously, people should be getting this book, immediately. Any last parting thoughts you have? And then, by the way, please stick around afterwards so we can kind of chat once the recording's off too.
Yeah. So last parting thoughts. So that book, which is, just recently came out, I started working on the next book, which I have an agreement with the publisher. It's a 2-book deal. And that's going to be coming out August of 2021. I'm sorry, 2020. We're in 2021. August 2022. And here's my last parting words. You ready? Beware of big tech. Okay, big tech is taking over your life right now. Your mind, your emotions, even your kid's classroom is now in their bedroom. Big tech is here and they're stealing everything from us right now. Beware of that. That's all. I'm going to leave you with that. That's where the next direction I'm heading.
Yeah. Well, that's anybody that denies or can't see that they really are being delusional. That there's no question about that at all, for sure. So, well, Tom, this has been fantastic. Again, just a reminder, anybody viewing this, please sign up for my YouTube channel, Playing It Forward Coaching, where we have outstanding people like Tom Kersting, who, by the way, is a national and worldwide author. He's known all over the place. He's does all kinds of seminars and Zoom events. And Tom, what's a good way for people to get in touch with you if they want, to have you in for any kind of your services? Please add that information in.
Yeah, my website, it's just www.tomkersting.com. And then
and it's Kersting, Kersting.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and you can just go there and then you can email me. The email's tom@tomkersting.com.
Right. And the final thing I'll say is, and Tom and I really hit it off very well when we met, because when I see another guy that, I try to be very proactive on things, but when I run into another guy that's, even a lead dog on my proactivity, I'm very impressed. So Tom, thank you so very, very much. I do appreciate it. And you have a good rest of the weekend, and hey, good luck shopping with your wife today.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to do. I can't. It's another few more months until golf season starts up here, so another couple of months.
There you go. There you go. Well, thanks again, Tom. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you.